Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis News from September 5th to the 11th. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learn something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so you don't miss any future videos. Then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you feel ready if you wish to do so. But today we do have to start with a correction of a story that I reported on Wednesday. So my apologies, I was working with the best information that I had at the time, but thank you Matt Lemairs, who writes for MJ Biz Daily, for highlighting that the TLRY press release that we got during the week wasn't so accurate. As new, some German government officials cited in a recent TLRY press release say some key facts were not correct. They say there was no roundtable. One lawmaker cited says she wasn't even there. False. Bleinart presented the plan for legalization. And so obviously we don't like to see this as much as it looks like, as it does not look good for TLRY at all. Also not for the German government, not so much for them, but more importantly, it still does not take away from the fact that TLRY is listed on major exchanges. TLRY does have cultivation in Germany, and they do own a distribution chain of pharmacies in Germany as well. So it doesn't change a lot of the facts on the ground, but again, just not a good look for TLRY. And so a bit more information on here. So I wanted to share this. You can grab the link below if you want to read the whole article. This is, of course, the press release that they published that I reported on Wednesday. And so just a bit more info without going deep into the story, but I emailed the German politicians who were allegedly at the meeting to simply ask when the roundtable happened because that detail was not in the PR. They reply, "We like to inform you that there is no roundtable with TLRY and the Federal Government Commissioner for Addiction and Drug Issues. There was a one-time conversation with several political representatives on September 6, 2022, but it was not part of the preparatory phase of cannabis. I asked whether they were disputing some of the contents of the TLRY PR. Reply, the content of the press release is just not correct. We are not downplaying a meeting because there is no cooperation and there will be none either with TLRY," which is, I mean, fair enough, but TLRY does still operate and is one of the main medical suppliers, especially as Canada is one of the main importers, but TLRY does have cultivation in the country as well as some other LPs like Aurora. But besides that, on no level to be clear. I also asked whether German Drug Commissioner Burke presented the plan for adult use cannabis legalization as stated in the TLRY press release. His reply, Mr. Bleinart only outlined the schedule has already been published several times. And so while this again just does not look good on TLRY, it doesn't take away from the fact that German politicians and lawmakers are still planning and working towards writing up legislation that they plan to finish by the end of this year, that they hope to pass hopefully in 2023 based on timelines they've given us before implementing it in law hopefully by 2024. Obviously this stuff takes time. So again, my apologies for the hopium, but even as a TLRY shareholder, I did not like seeing this at all, as this is just awfully shitty PR, but at the same time, the stage is really set, so it's not going to make me sell my shares, when in reality, TLRY is still working hard at normalizing cannabis across the globe, and they got my respect for at least doing that. And so with that, just wanted to share from International Cannabis Chronicle that a German poll as of September 9th highlights that more than 60% support cannabis legalization. So this is just to reiterate that it is going to happen in Germany. Lawmakers are writing up the legislation. It just doesn't seem like TLRY is partnering and working alongside them, as if TLRY has some sort of special partnership that all other companies and producers, especially locally in Germany, wouldn't have. And so more information on this. You're not going to go through the whole thing, but you can pause to read just if you wanted to learn what how they came to this conclusion and more about this this poll. And then as well, diving into the results, you can pause to read as well. And so with that, we come back to the U.S. So thanks, Tom Angle, for highlighting Illinois has already hit $1 billion in recreational cannabis sales for the year, 2 months ahead of when that milestone was reached in 2021. So good job, Illinois. Keep crushing it. And there has now been more than $3 billion worth of adult use cannabis sold since the market launched in 2020. And so obviously seeing the benefits of ending cannabis prohibition already. I'm not going to go through the whole article. You can grab it below, but mainly just highlighting the sales figures here. We saw July hitting a peak of 135.6 million. You probably can't see this down here, unfortunately, whereas August pulled back a little bit to 129.4 million. But just highlighting that sales are heading in the right direction as we anticipate more dispensaries to come online as those extra 185 have been rewarded and should come online hopefully early 2023. And so with that, just reiterating, as ChicagoTribune.com even highlighting, thanks Todd Harrison for sharing more cannabis dispensaries needed to reach the goal. And this is coming out of Illinois as a Chicago Tribune. And so reiterating what is going to help drive the growth that we just highlighted, the mayor and the reparations committee hope to see more cannabis dispensaries open across the city in an effort to reap the benefits from the cannabis tax. And so while there's been a lot of delays for this, the delays have been lifted and this is proceeding to carry on. And so Obviously, this will help a lot. It's going to drive a lot more sales, going to bring in a lot more tax revenue, more jobs for people in Illinois, obviously more dispensaries in a state with a legal market is obviously a good thing. And so with that, also very happy to report that Arizona rec sales stay sky high as medical cannabis sales crater. And so those are rec sales obviously picking up while medical sales are going down. But that happens when legal markets launch, because if you know the cannabis that you need and you don't need to go to a doctor, you can just go to the dispensary to get it. People are just going to go to the dispensary once they know that they can get the cannabis themselves. And so sales of medical cannabis dipped to slightly less than 45 million in May, their lowest total since January 2021, when adults were first allowed to purchase cannabis for recreational use. And meanwhile, initial estimates from tax collectors peg rec sales at 76.5 million, the fifth time adult use sales surpassed the 70 million mark. And the ADOR, Department of Revenue, probably revised April sales upwards to 81.2 million, up from the initial estimate of 75.5 million, making it the best sales month yet for recreational cannabis. And so good to see that update, as 81.2 million is not significantly, but definitely more than 75.5 million, while the previous record was 80.4 million in March. So yeah, good to see March being beaten in April, especially a month that has 420. So a lot more information here if you wanted to pause to read. Not going to go through it all, but we'll leave it here for you. Otherwise, you can grab the link below. While we move on to Florida, looking at the Office of Medical Cannabis use for this past week, September 5th to the 9th, we can see that Liberty Health Sciences, backed by Air, opened a new dispensary in Daytona Beach. Sanctuary Cannabis, I apologize, I don't know the company that backs them, but Delray Beach, they opened a new location there. Well, we've got Sunnyside, backed by Cresco Labs, opened a new location in Panama City Beach. And if we look at the qualified patient count in Florida, they increased that to 749,604, so close to the 750,000 mark. So they'll get there, they'll surpass that next week, but this adds 2,209 patients week over week. So again, since summer has ended, good to see that number going up above the 2,000 mark, as it typically does when we're in the off season and not in peak summer. And so lastly, just going through dispensations for September 2nd to the 8th, 2022, we see all the MSOs lined up that are operating in Florida. We see the number of dispensary locations that they have in operation, and we can see the number of milligrams of THC sold, the number of milligrams of CBD sold, and the ounces of smokable flower sold from this past week. And so a lot of information in here that you can keep tabs, especially from this website if you want to favorite it and get the new updates from OMMU week over week. Otherwise, you can also follow Pierre Gilles on Twitter at Compound Value 87. So thank you, Pierre Gilles, for making this very digestible Florida THC market share comp sheet with the top 8 MSOs of this list, just broken down for you in an easy way in an easy visual. So thank you, Pierre. Highlighting Trulieve, Curaleaf, Liberty Health Sciences, MUV, Sortera Wellness, Fluent, Grow Healthy, and Vitacan so far leading the way, but we can see that month over month Trulieve is slowly but surely losing a bit of their market share, and so obviously that makes this market a lot more interesting, especially as they prepare for that ballot initiative in 2024 that will bring a massive boost with the introduction of an adult use market in Florida. And so last few stories out of states. Tom Engel, thanks for sharing this from Breaking. As a Missouri judge dismissed a lawsuit that sought to remove a cannabis legalization initiative from the state's November ballot, finding that its claims had no merit and the plaintiff didn't even have standing. So we love to see these prohibitionist lawsuits getting chucked out because they have no basis in reality. And so while the prohibitionists are still dumb and clearly haven't learned their lesson, saying that they will appeal, chances are they will not be able to win anything because the citizens in Missouri did everything legally required in order to get this on the ballot. So love to highlight this, and hopefully this doesn't change from now until November, and Missouri can get on the ballot as well, as they are one of the other states with a successful medical population a successful medical program and a large enough population to help drive strong sales in a newly legalized medical market, along with Maryland, which is going to be the other state with a ballot initiative on November, as a new Maryland campaign led by former NFL player Mr. Eugene Monroe kicked off with a video ad encouraging voters to approve the cannabis legalization referendum on the November ballot. Yes, on MD4. It's also backed with funding from Trulieve, which we love to see. So again, more efforts solidifying that we're hopefully going to have some good states, Maryland and Missouri, having their ballot initiatives successfully going through in November, so that the citizens can vote to reform their cannabis laws in the state. And so we'll keep tabs on this as well. Last one from the states, though, from Graham Farrar, wanted to share that DC lawmakers demand Congress end local cannabis sales prohibition as part of 2023 spending bill. And so while this sounds nice, we've seen this demanded every single year almost for the last 2 years, and Congress just doesn't listen. And so while this is a nice initiative, someone in DC did make a workaround. I think it was the mayor that basically allowed everyone in DC to just sign up as a medical patient with no sort of filtering or no screening whatsoever. And so that's how they get around this already. But at least they're still willing to try. Well, we've got this one from The Hill, and just wanted to share it as it's one of the few mainstream outlets still willing to talk about cannabis and the progress that it's slowly but surely if at all, making. But liberals push Biden on cannabis reform ahead of midterm momentum. So I'm not going to go through this because it literally just highlights Lieutenant Governor from Pennsylvania, John Fetterman, calling on Biden to decriminalize. And of course, we know that that didn't pan out at all. And let alone Fetterman, who can barely hold a sentence together. We got Biden, who can't hold a sentence together. Those two guys are not going to be the ones to get cannabis across the finish line. We know that. But that's mainly what this gets into, just saying that the momentum is building behind the Dems, and it certainly seems to be doing so. But of course, it ultimately stands on Schumer and what he ends up doing. And so you can grab the link below if you wanted to read through the whole thing, but my God, this next story we're going to jump to, if the Biden administration or the American government at any point was truly working for the will of the American people and in the best interest of their public health, this next story would be making headlines. So thank you, Aaron Reichland-Melnick, for sharing this, policy director at IMM Council. More important is what he shares is it's kind of stunning how much the legal cannabis market has effectively wiped out cross-border cannabis smuggling in barely a decade, which is huge because this is the direct consequence of creating legal adult use market that creates competition for the black market, therefore decreasing the incentive of organized crime groups to continue selling cannabis because people are choosing to put their money in the local economy, empowering that economy versus making the organized crime groups more powerful. Now, obviously, that they can just switch to a different substance. Now it's fentanyl, and that creates new problems to address. But obviously, and legalizing cannabis and ending prohibition speaks for itself, and the data is finally in. And so, just happy to share. In fiscal year 2013, Customs and Border Protection seized over 2.9 million pounds of cannabis. This year, it's on track to seize under 225,000 pounds. So take that, prohibitionists. The data doesn't lie, speaks for itself. And so the blue bar looks at cannabis seized at a point of entry, and the green bar looks at cannabis seized by Border Patrol. And over time, as states, especially along the border, end cannabis prohibition, we see this number going down. And this should be in headlines everywhere. And so with that, just wanted to share some other snippets from people reporting on cannabis. So senior reporter from Business Insider Trading. So take it with a grain of salt, as he does write for Business Insider. But this is Jeremy Burke, longtime cannabis reporter, highlighting that Senator Jeff Merkley speaking at the PBC conference today in D.C. So just to highlight some snippets that he got from here, and so this is Senator Merkley saying it's time to close the deal in Safe Banking Plus. He said, added, it's mostly small community banks that want to serve customers in his home state of Oregon, not Wall Street whatsoever. So again, not serving Wall Street necessarily, it's serving local banks, but people around that want to help supply these cannabis companies. No one has paid a political price ever for supporting cannabis in this country. I wouldn't say that's true because you're not going to be able to be a politician much longer because you're not going to get funding. But times have changed, and it's better than ever, at least, to support cannabis. And so, lastly, says Safe Plus includes elements of social equity that Sens Booker and Schumer are pushing for, like expungements of cannabis offenses, community grant programs, and reinvestment schemes. And so, again, the more they try to get social equity into Safe Plus, the more that we think Safe Plus might not have a chance because you have to keep some Republicans on board. We don't necessarily know, but again, just sharing what was talked about this week. And then last one's from Merkley, says these are elements that can carry both Republicans and Democrats. Says folks who should be allies have been obstacles when it comes to supporting safe banking because of the lack of equity provision. So again, don't know if this mentions 280E or climb. Just wanted to share this with you as it is talking about getting Safe Plus passed, though. Mind you, we have this other one from Jesse Redmond. So again, take it with a grain of salt. But this one does make us a bit more optimistic, or gives us a little bit more hopium. As Jesse Redmond shares, I participated in the Needham virtual conference today. In separate meetings, 2 Tier 1 CEOs were not just bullish on SAFE, but said there may be a path to uplisting and 280E removal. And my thought is, based on what we just saw in the last one from Jeff Merkley, we could see maybe Republicans saying, you can have some social equity provisions as long as there's path to uplisting in 280E. I can see these as bargaining chips. So again, we don't know what's going to happen. Plan accordingly for your own situation, but just sharing all the developments of this past week. Because they figured out a revenue neutral way to do it. Please see my disclaimer below. And so again, take this with a grain of salt. This may be hopium, but it was brought up in context of using equity for funding and potential reasons to hold off. So figured he'd share what he was hearing. So again, just take this with a grain of salt, but we do like to hear that versus not hearing it at all. And so with that, some snippets from investment firms. So again, still speculation, but from some more established looking institutions that have more access to information than we do. So this is from Jeffries on U.S. Cannabis. Thanks, Todd Harrison, for sharing this one. So not going to go through the whole thing, but you can pause to read. Is Safe Plus taking shape? I'll let you decide, be the decider of that one. Well, we've got this one from Roth on U.S. Cannabis, so thank you, Todd Harrison, for sharing this one. Another one you can read through. Cannabis remains a compelling secular growth story. Macro headwinds and legislative delays are a near-term issue. And so some of this might be cut off here. So you can grab the whole link below if you want to read through it. But again, just more information that you can read and compare with what you already know to help you potentially make better investment decisions down the line. And so last few ones, this one from Todd Harrison, a nifty chart from ATB on U.S. Cannabis. So thanks for sharing this one. It is quite interesting. ATB Capital Markets, Inc. Note all estimates are FactSet consensus. But so yeah, the sources company reports FactSet and ATB Capital Markets. But essentially, it's just highlighting all the MSOs across the board including an active dispensary count here right beside this little shop logo that they have, plus the number of states that each MSO is actively in spread across the US. And so on the left side, we see MSO revenues in the millions, and then down here we can see 2021 actual sales lined up across the left side, and then we see 2022 estimates in the darker blue and 2023 estimates in the gray. And so of course, Curaleaf leading the way right now in sales, behind that Trulieve, behind that GTI, behind that Verano, and behind that Cresco Labs and Columbia Care, which will combine to be a new entity hopefully by the end of this year. And so obviously, we look forward to seeing when those two come together. And then the other MSOs, Air Wellness, Ascend Wellness Holdings, TerraSend, and Jushi. And so definitely interesting to note the concentration of the flags do matter. So this is a very interesting but helpful visual from ATV. So thanks for sharing that one, Todd. And then the last one, Todd Harrison. This is more of a political one, not necessarily focused on cannabis, but just wanted to share it as it is from someone I reference often, BTIG's Isaac Boltanski, on the U.S. election coming up in November. So not cannabis related, more election related, but 2022 midterm election expectations and implications. So you can pause to read just for more info if you wanted to break down all of what they are possibly expecting. And so on to some MSO news, as Trulieve opens its first branded dispensary in Tucson, Arizona this past week. So location now open, grand opening celebration on the 17th. And so they announced on the 10th, which was yesterday, the opening of the first Trulieve branded dispensary in Tucson, located at this address. The new dispensary is now open with ongoing hours of 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. daily. Opening early so people can get their breakfast cannabis if they want it. Start their day on the right foot. Some more information here, but good to see Trulieve trying to get their Trulieve brand out west as well, and expanding the awareness there so more people can become Trulievers. Well, I wanted to share this interesting one from Join Mode, which seems like another data platform, a personalized cannabis delivery device for an ideal experience every time. And so similar to BDSA and Headset, but this one focused on delivery, it appears. Top 5 brands on the Mode platform in August. Shout out to these great brands for consistently being at the top of the list and providing consistent quality product over the years. What are your favorite cartridge brands? And so we can see number 1, Select, which is backed by Curaleaf, so love to see that. Number 2, Moxie. I don't know if Moxie is backed by an MSO. Could also just be a single state operator, so just not going to comment on that. While Cresco Labs, we see number 3, one of the tier 1 MSOs as well. And so good to see Curaleaf and Cresco in these. While Curvana's number 4 and Raw Garden number 5, I just apologize, I don't know the companies that are behind these. Number 4, number 5 listings, but good to see a few of the top tier 1 MSOs. Again, when I recommend investing in any of these U.S. cannabis companies, you want to look at the tier 1 as the safest bets. Any tier 2 or tier 3s are a little bit more risky as time goes on and we see more and more delays. It makes it harder for them to stay afloat. And so just keep in mind the tier 1s are the ones that I've invested in and the ones that I think are going to promise the best return on investment in time, as they are the ones that are run the best. So last few ones, just to highlight another one from Curaleaf Inc., or at least shared by Curaleaf, but it highlights thedrinkbusiness.com. Cannabis drinks market value set to grow by US $8.3 billion in 2032. But do take this with a grain of salt, as it looks more like an advertorial for Curaleaf than really an objective article. But their main push here is that the drinks, they expect it to have a compounded annual growth rate of 37.3% to get to 8.3 billion by 2032. But keep in mind, that's a decade away, and 8.3 billion isn't much. It's a drop in the bucket compared to the 25 billion that the US saw in sales last year alone. And so I think this just highlights how small of a market share drinks currently have and why Curaleaf is betting big on them. So I'm not going to go through it, but you can grab the link below if you wanted to read through it. While we jump over this one, so thanks, Todd, for sharing this. Unfortunately, apparently Canadian cannabis stocks dumped by the world's largest sovereign fund. And as Norway's sovereign wealth fund is excluding several Canadian cannabis companies because they produce recreational cannabis, which remains illegal in the Nordic country. And so unfortunate to see Norway stand for the status quo and continue to demonize cannabis, but also just seems like it sucks to suck when you sell for a big loss, as opposed to doing your job and preserving the wealth of your clients, versus selling based on outdated views versus the fundamentals on the ground and the growth potential that these companies have in the future. And so, but ain't that a sign of the times? Instead of helping normalize cannabis for the effective medicine that it is, they continue to demonize it and take actions that effectively make all their clients poorer, because the sovereign wealth fund still gets their percentages. So sadly, with that, good news, as we got some studies, Sterling CBD data shows that over 50% of CBD users are part of the baby boomer and Gen X generation. So we love to see older generations starting to realize the potential of cannabis and taking better advantage of it. So the baby boomer generation's use of CBD and cannabinoid products is surging, according to new data from Sterling CBD. Boomers' use of CBD and cannabinoids increased 212% last year. Now more than 50% of those using the products are in the baby boomer and Gen X demographic groups. So you can pause to read for a bit more information here, but the main findings that they came up with was, according to the company, CBD has risen in popularity largely because of the variety of health benefits it claims to offer, including improved coordination, relief from occasional pain, circulatory concerns, blood management, and brain function. While as awareness of the benefits of CBD has grown, so has Americans' use of the product, as 33% of Americans adults have used CBD once or more. 64% of Americans are familiar with CBD and or CBD products. An estimated 64 million Americans have tried CBD in the last 24 months, and of those who use CBD, 22% said it helped them supplement or replace prescription and over-the-counter drugs. And this should be the biggest finding, as this will help reduce deaths from the opioid epidemic that is unfortunately ravaging America at the same time. And so great to see these numbers going up in the right direction. And then so lastly, just spreading this one as well. I've featured the study already previously, but just wanted to share it as another article is highlighting it. Above the Law, study further helps destigmatize cannabis use. And so the findings are in the lazy stoner stereotypes. Time to throw those out because they're not true and they do have no basis in reality. As a recent study conducted by a team of scientists at the University of College London, University of Cambridge, and Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology, and Neuroscience at King's College is casting doubt on the long ingrained stereotype that cannabis users are indifferent, lazy stoners. And so I do believe I've covered this one. As through their research, these scientists examined whether cannabis users showed higher levels of apathy, loss of motivation, and anhedonia, loss of interest in or pleasure from rewards, as well as whether they were less willing to exert physical effort to receive a reward. The team studied 274 adolescent and adult cannabis users. I thought the other study might have had a larger base, like something of 700 or 800, but I guess I could be wrong, who on average had been using cannabis 4 times a week for at least 3 months, and compared them with non-users of the same age and gender. And so results are down here, showed that cannabis users seemed actually more capable of enjoying themselves and were no less motivated than the non-user group. The researchers also found no correlation between frequency of cannabis use and either apathy or anhedonia in the people who use cannabis. And over half of the participants also carried out a number of behavioral tasks. When compiling this data, the researchers found no difference between cannabis users and non-users or between age groups on either the physical effort task or the real reward pleasure task, confirming findings from existing studies on the matter. And so the study, which is one of the first to directly compare adolescents and adult cannabis users, also suggests that adolescents are no more vulnerable than adults to the potential harmful effects of cannabis on motivation, the experience of pleasure, or the brain's response to reward. That being said, the scientists acknowledge that while this first study shows no apparent link between cannabis motivation and pleasure and the brain's response to reward, new studies need to be conducted to examine these associations over time and confirm the validity of these findings, particularly that frequent cannabis use by adolescents will not negatively impact their motivation and brain development. So happy to reshare these positive findings, especially as they're based in reality and not in the biased minds of old money prohibitionists that want to keep the status quo alive. And so you can read the first and second of the behavioral tasks that they put subjects through, but nonetheless just happy to spread this awareness, as the more data we can collect, the better, to help destigmatize cannabis and normalize it as an effective medicine, also as a recreational substance that's much healthier for you than alcohol or tobacco. And obviously more people using cannabis than alcohol or tobacco would make the world a better, safer, and likely more productive place based on the findings here. And that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I'll catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update. Have a great week, everybody.